All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Politics Matters here on AM 950 Radio, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. I'm your host, Bruce Klopfleisch, coming to you today from my home because this is the morning after our latest snowstorm. So this is going to look a little bit different, so this is a first for the show, doing it remotely. So hopefully everything turns out okay. So thanks for tuning in. If you have a question, email it to comment@am950radio.com. So normally I start the show with a civic segment, which I'm going to do here. But before I get to that, I want to, since it's on my mind, it just happened this morning, I want to mention a bit of good news in the midst of all this bad news that's going on right now. So this morning, the Supreme Court denied the Trump administration's appeal of the withholding the $2 billion in money that Congress had already appropriated. So this was a case where a district court judge issued a temporary injunction saying, you got to pay that money, Trump, because it's already been appropriated. You can't just decide not to pay it. So the Trump administration appealed it, and it got up to the Supreme Court. And this morning they just issued an opinion denying Trump's request, although they're sending it back down to the lower court, and that particular judge has to decide with a little more detail about how much money each place is going to get and when the money has to be paid, some more details in that particular case. But the two Republicans that sided with the three Democrats were Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. So I had talked before about how, at least I think, these series of Supreme Court cases that are going to happen here during Trump's presidency, Roberts and Barrett are the key two that are going to, if the Dems have any hope, are going to have to join in with the three Democrats to make the 5-justice majority, which is what they did in this particular case. So this doesn't mean, that this is, all done and everything else, because the next question is going to be, well, what happens if, the judge does his order and orders Trump to do this, and then they don't do it? That's the next thing that's going to happen here, because then at that point, I think we might have a constitutional crisis going on if Trump says, "Oh, screw you, I'm not doing this." So hopefully it doesn't get that far, but we'll see. So at least starting to show us some good news for a change. Haven't gotten a whole lot of good news out of the Supreme Court lately, but we did there. So today, for the civics portion, we're up to the 12th Amendment to the Constitution. So I'm not going to go through that like the previous amendments. I've actually said what they're, the wording of it, the actual wording. Not going to do it here because it's long. The 12th Amendment is about the Electoral College. So remember that the Electoral College is the entity that actually elects the president. The Electoral College is only involved with the presidential election. So we covered initially what the original Constitution said about the Electoral College. Well, the 12th Amendment changes at least part of what was said in the original Constitution. So this is another part, like the 11th Amendment kind of tweaked part of the judicial branch jurisdiction for the federal courts. Well, now the 12th Amendment is tweaking the Electoral College. So this came about because of some weird elections in 1796 and 1800. So as a result of those, and I'll go through those here in just a second, but as a result of those two elections and what happened in them, Congress then proposed a constitutional amendment which was passed in 1804 prior to the next presidential election. So the new Electoral College was in place for the 1804 presidential election, which Jefferson won. So basically what happened here is after George Washington retired, he said, "I quit, I'm not doing this anymore, 2 terms is enough." In 1796, we had John Adams. He was the Federalist. Like, he was the one that, he was Washington's vice president, so he was a Federalist. With the pro-Constitution guys, the pro-big government, national government guys. So he ran in 1796. And Thomas Jefferson, he ran as a party that he called the Democratic Republican Party. These were mainly the anti-federalists, the people that did not want the Constitution, more of the pro-states' rights type of politicians and people. So he ran in that particular party against Adams. Now, at that time, in the 1796 election, the Electoral College, which is in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3 of the Constitution, said that the electors vote for two people in the Electoral College. And the person that wins the most votes of all those electors gets to be president. Assuming they get a majority of the Electoral College votes. If they don't, then it goes to the House. Okay. But assuming that you do, you become president. The person that comes in second place becomes vice president. Now, if there's no majority for the vice president, then the Senate votes on the vice president. Is how the original Electoral College was laid out. So, in 1796, Adams won in the Electoral College 71-68, beating Jefferson, which was enough. That was 51.1% of the Electoral College votes, so he won, even though there was only 3 vote difference there. But under the original Electoral College at that time, Thomas Jefferson of the opposing party became the vice president because he came in second place. So this is an example of, the Founding Fathers kind of, they didn't like political parties, but, this is a result of not really foreseeing that enough so that the opposing party got to be vice president. So if Adams would have died during that, his only first term there, his only term, Jefferson would have became president. The opposing party would essentially be, come out on top, actually, because, they become the vice president, so they would benefit from the death of the president, which, again, doesn't make much sense. But that's how the Electoral College first was. So even though, Jefferson lost, he could have become the president. These two didn't get along at all, Adams and Jefferson. Jefferson wasn't really the vice president. He hated Adams and what the Adams administration was doing, so he was, barely around. Now, later on in life, they did get along. And strangely enough, they both died on July 4th, 1826. Jefferson died first. He was 83 years old, and Adams died a few hours later. He was 90. So that was the 1896 election. Then we have the 1800 election. So same 2 contestants there. John Adams trying to win a second term. Jefferson trying to, beat him for the second time this time. He lost the first election, trying to beat him on the second time around. This time, though, there was a tie for Jefferson and his vice presidential candidate, Aaron Burr. So Burr was running as the vice president with Jefferson, and they both got the same number of votes. So nobody got first place, nobody got second place. They tied. So somebody, on the Democratic Republican Party forgot to, not vote for Burr, apparently, so that he would finish second. Whoops, here we now have this big problem. So at this particular time, this was also kind of a weird situation because to break the tie to go to the House, the old Congress, run by the Federalists at that point, the House, would be the one deciding the election. Right? It's not the new Congress at that point. It would be the old one. So this was just, really strange goings on. So you can see why they eventually passed this change to the Electoral College. But the Federalists controlled the House. Okay, so they went through and, the Federalists made sure there was, all kinds of problems and everything. So they kept voting and voting and voting, and there was, it was always a tie. Until the 36th ballot, Alexander Hamilton from New York convinced enough Federalists that, Jefferson would be better than Aaron Burr. Let's not forget that Aaron Burr killed Hamilton in a duel, later on. Probably as, part of it was this thing. But Hamilton changed enough votes that Jefferson ended up winning on the 36th ballot. Because at that time you needed 16 states, which was, an even number. So this is how you ran into trouble. So you needed to get 9 states to, win the majority. And because remember, you vote by states here. It's not just a majority of everybody in the House. It's states. So, the Federalists kept making it so Jefferson couldn't get 9, and then finally they did. They struck this deal. So the Congress then said, the last 2 elections, didn't turn out very well. We got to change this. So what they did is they changed the Electoral College to basically say now, okay, you're going to vote for the president and the vice president now, right? Now you're going to, ultimately do separate ballots here, but you're voting for the same ticket. So you're not going to get any more ties between the president and the vice presidential candidates. So you're voting for the party ticket now, rather than just the individuals. So that's the big major change that they did in the 12th Amendment. The other change that they made was back in the original Electoral College, you had to get, if it went to the House, the top 5 people, in the election were then, eligible to win the presidency. Well, this 12th Amendment changes that to now not 5 anymore, but now it's 3. So the top 3 then, are eligible to get some votes in the House if you need them. So now you need a majority of the House or majority of the states to win. So right now that's 26 states now in present day. So, that's for if the president, doesn't get a majority and it goes to the House. If there's no majority for vice president, then the Senate picks one. But again, hopefully the 12th Amendment is supposed to take care of that issue. But so that's the major change that they made, was basically they got rid of the possibility of a tie vote for president and vice president. So now you're voting for the ticket instead. But this did not take care of everything because they ran into another problem in 1824 where the top 3 were all of the same party. They were all Democratic Republicans. You got Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams, and William Crawford were the top 3. They were all running from the same party. 4th place guy was Henry Clay, same party. So this was a time when the Federalists were basically dead as a party. Democrat Republicans, ruled the roost here, and so they didn't have a majority of the Electoral College. So it went to the House again. All right, so the top 3 guys, Jackson, Adams, and Crawford, were eligible. Now, even though Jackson won the popular vote, he lost in the Electoral College. Here's why he lost. Henry Clay made a deal with John Quincy Adams to take his delegates, make sure all his delegates that supported him would now vote for Adams rather than Jackson. In the meantime, Adams had to promise that he will make Clay his Secretary of State in return, which he did do. Henry Clay became Secretary of State for Adams, and Adams won in the House. So this was the first time, this 1824 election, where the popular vote winner actually lost in the Electoral College. So Jackson leaves the party, forms the new Democratic Party, and then wins the 1828 election pretty handily. So there's some other times where the popular vote winner ended up losing in the Electoral College. In 1876, Samuel Tilden won a majority of the votes, over 50% of the votes of the popular vote, but he lost in the House because they made a deal where the Republican Rutherford Hayes became president in exchange for pulling the federal troops out of the South, which they did. I talked about that in a previous show. In 1888, Grover Cleveland, who was the incumbent president, was running and, for re-election. He won the popular vote, but he lost to Benjamin Harrison in the Electoral College. Similarly, this happened in 2000, where Al Gore won the popular vote, but George Bush was given the presidency by the Supreme Court. And then finally we had it happen in 2016, where Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but Trump won in the Electoral College. So there's been some attempts to get rid of the Electoral College. It would take a constitutional amendment, or there's a way around that where there is trying to have a way around it, where there's a push for the national popular vote, interstate compact it's called, where basically the states will get together and make an agreement where whoever wins the popular vote nationally will get all of their Electoral College votes in the states that belong to this compact. So here's how at least they're going to try and get around the Constitution is Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 talks about each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct how their electors, divide up their votes. So what these various state legislatures are doing is passing laws saying, okay, we're going to direct our Electoral College people to give all of their votes to the person who wins the national popular vote, not the popular vote in just their state, but whoever wins the national popular vote gets all of their votes. So right now they need to get 270 Electoral College votes to do that. Right now they're at 209. So currently there's 17 states that have done this. Minnesota is one that has done this. So they got to get up to 270. So right now they need 61 more. So they need some more states to get in there. I suspect if this does pass and it does end up somehow that this goes through and somebody wins an election because of the interstate, this interstate compact, it'll probably end up in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will have to decide on it. But this is a way to try and get around the Electoral College part in Clause 3 of Article 2, but going in with Clause 2 where it says the states can determine how their Electoral College people vote. So we'll have to see if that gains any more momentum or not. But right now they're at 209, but they need to get up to enough states to get up to that 270 number right now. All right, so that's it for the 12th Amendment. So as we go to break here, the next series of amendments are going to be 13, 14, and 15. These are the ones that happened after the Civil War, and they're very important additions to the Constitution, particularly the 14th Amendment. So we will talk to you about some politics when we come back from the break. Talk to you then.
Those were the best times, most of all.
All right, welcome back to the second segment of Politics Matters, how civics, politics, and law affect you here on AM 950 Radio, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm your host, Bruce Klopfleisch. Thanks for tuning into the show today. If you have a question, send it to comment at am950radio.com. So this next segment is going to be a little bit of a reaction to Trump's presidential address last night. I didn't actually watch it. I haven't been able to watch Trump for a long time just because I just can't handle all his lies anymore. So what I do now is I see some of the like after speech comments and review some YouTube videos for people that cover it, that kind of thing. So it's not like I don't know what he said. I mean, I catch the highlights. So I still just can't listen to the liar in chief. I mean, that's what he is, and all indications are that's what he did last night. I mean, that's what he does every time he talks. So there's a lot that he said, but I'm going to focus mainly on one thing that I think people really got to watch for. Is I think he's going to come after Social Security. Now, it may not be like banning Social Security or stopping, totally the system tomorrow or anything like that. But he's going to come after it either by trying to privatize it like George Bush tried to do and failed. But it wouldn't surprise me if him and Musk try to privatize Social Security or cut benefits, not getting rid of the program entirely, but cutting benefits because, the national debt's so big, we have to save some money. So cutting the benefits is certainly a possibility. Now, Trump a lot of times goes around saying, I'm not going to touch Medicaid. I'm not going to touch Medicare. I'm not going to touch Social Security. He didn't say that last night, as far as I can tell. So that's a big tell to me is he didn't say that stuff last night, at least about Social Security. So here's what I think is going to, I think he's going to go after it. Some of this, some of his rhetoric and some of the, stuff that I saw that he said remind me of his rhetoric that he used to say that the 2020 election was a fraud. Okay, and I think some of the stuff that he said last night is he's using the same sort of things, and now he's going to say, like Musk came out and said, well, Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme ever, right? So he's using some of the same sort of lines that he used about the 2020 election being a fraud, and now he's going to make the same sort of comments or other people rather than him. He'll get J.D. Vance out there and Musk out there, and they'll start talking about all this fraud they found on Social Security and all these dead people getting money and blah, 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 right? You can just see this happening. Social Security is full of waste, fraud, and abuse, right? Doge has found millions and millions of dollars of fraud, which is totally false. But that doesn't stop him, it doesn't stop the liar in chief and all his sycophants from running around saying the same stuff. This is similar to what he said, to get all the people all ready to go on January 6th. He's told the people to go storm the Capitol, essentially. Well, now he's going to start talking about going after Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. He's already talked about cutting Medicaid. I covered that in the last show. I'll probably might talk about it a little more today here too, but I think he's going to start coming after Social Security. Now, if this doesn't get you, it doesn't get your neighbors, doesn't get your family members or, even Republicans, doesn't raise an eyebrow for the Republicans at least, how are they going to feel when they don't get their Social Security or they don't get as much Social Security? Trump has fired, and this is why, again, I think he's coming after Social Security. They just fired 7,000 Social Security workers, which is going to make getting your Social Security claim or reviewing your case or having a hearing in front of a judge to get disability is going to take a lot longer now that there's 7,000 less people to process your case. This is all part of his plan to get rid of all these workers, and then he's going to claim, the government doesn't work, so only I can fix it. And, I'm going to be the dictator. I'm going to take care of all this stuff. I mean, you can just see this coming. So I really hope that people, that show up in the town halls and I'll start going after the Republicans, assuming they even have any more. I'm not even convinced that they will. They'll just not go to town halls anymore. I'll come back to that later. But this has got to get more people fired up to save their Social Security. So that, the Republicans and people who voted for Trump now, are you willing to give up your Social Security money or a chunk of it because you don't like what the Democrats are doing? Because you're going to have to make that choice, I think, at some point. Are you willing to give up your Social Security now just to own the libs? Or because the libs, the Democrats are too woke for you? Whatever that means, right? Well, you're probably going to have to make that choice. Democrats, on the other hand, are not coming after your Social Security. They want to increase your Social Security. Maybe you should start voting for Democrats. Okay, I talked about this last week about rural voters. Like, this isn't one of those where, if you're going to live on with Social Security being a big part of your retirement, well, it's going to get smaller with the Republicans in charge. So one way you can do this is to lift the Social Security cap on income. So what's this? Well, in 2025, for your for Social Security taxes, when you work, it's a payroll tax, right? 6.2% of your money is taken out of your paycheck every year to pay for Social Security. Well, every paycheck actually, but it adds up every year. Well, that only covers the first $176,100. Now, for most of us, that covers all of our paychecks, all the money we make during the year, right? But there's plenty of people in this country that make over $176,100. So what is the Social Security tax they pay when they make, let's say, $200,000? Well, they only pay income tax, the 6.2%, up to the $176,100. Anything they make above that is not taxed for Social Security. So all the millionaires, all the billionaires, the multimillionaires, rich people, whatever you want to call them, who make over $176,100 are not paying Social Security tax on that portion of money above that number. So one of the proposals is get rid of that cap. Tax it like, the rest of us. 6.2% for all your money. That's how Medicare is paid. There's a 1.45% payroll tax on that. There's no cap on that. So that helps the Medicare program. But this is one way they can help the Social Security program. Get rid of that cap. And you know why the cap is in there, right? I mean, the rich people bought enough politicians to throw it in there, and it's staying there. Now that number increases over the years, but still, there's lots of people who make more than that, and they're not paying Social Security tax on that money. So this is a big savings for rich people, which is the whole point, right? You get rid of the cap, you can sustain the program much longer. Now, roughly 6% of the people in this country, working people, make more than that cap. So if you do some calculations there, that would have added $388 billion to the Social Security program if you didn't have that cap over the years. Imagine how much better the situation would be for Social Security program right now. Plus, I think they should tax more than just income for the rich people, because that's not how they make their money. They make their money on interest and capital gains tax for all their stock market stuff that they do, right? So tax that too. Tax the rich people more. I'll talk about that later too. That'll be able to save the Social Security program and increase the amount of money that you get. Well, what else was he kind of talking about during his speech? Well, he's bragging about his tariffs. So now the tariffs have started, right? So Canada, 25%. Mexico, 25%. China, it was 10. Now it's 20 for China. These are our 3 top trading partners, and now he's slapped tariffs on all 3 of them. So not surprisingly, this is what happens when you put tariffs on countries a lot of times, is they put tariffs on you, right? They retaliate, same percentages, maybe they tweak it here and there, these other countries, but, it's roughly the same. They might have, a few differences. But now we're in a trade war with those 3 countries. So from Canada, we get a lot of food from Canada. We get a lot of crude oil from Canada. We get a lot of lumber from Canada. Get ready for lumber prices to go up. You're already seeing gas prices starting to go up now, right? From Mexico, we get, food from there. We get cars from Mexico. You're going to start paying more for cars as a result of these tariffs. China, right? We buy all kinds of stuff from China. Well, now you're going to pay 20% more for it. Plus, farmers, as I mentioned in the last show, farmers are going to lose your markets. China was the largest importer of our food. Well, now they're going to go with Brazil. This happened during the Trump 1.0 administration, as I call it now. So how many of you farmers voted for him this time? Knowing that, if you were paying attention, knowing this would happen, because, he wasn't bashful about saying this. I don't think you can count on Trump 2.0 bailing you out like he did with what Trump 1.0 did with those subsidies for your farmers. So not surprisingly, of course, he blamed Biden for the high cost of eggs. Right. But, I'm not buying that lie either, and I hope most Americans aren't buying that either. Are you going to keep blaming Biden for the next 3.5 years, Trump, for all this stuff that's going to go wrong, that you're causing? How is Biden, keeping egg prices high? That's you. You've been in 6-7 weeks. You know darn well that if it was if this was the other way around, you'd be blaming Biden, even though he was only in for 6 weeks. I mean, come on. So, what else is going up? Well, inflation is going back up, right? Gas is going back up. Unemployment is going up. Unemployment, that I think that's going to get worse. Once you start all these people who are being deported, that are probably not counted because they aren't citizens and they weren't, some of them weren't in the system, so to speak. They're not counting those people. So I think the unemployment rate's even going to be higher than what they come out with. So guess what's going to go down? That's going to hurt us. That would be GDP, gross domestic product. The initial forecast under Biden, just towards the end when he was leaving, they forecasted, the Federal Reserve forecasted, a bunch of economists forecasted a 4% growth for the first quarter GDP. If Trump didn't screw it up. Well, now he's screwing it up. The Federal Reserve Bank in Atlanta now has forecasted a negative 2.9% loss. So it's not 4%, subtract 3%. So, hey, we're still going to have a 1% increase. No. This is a negative 3. Well, 2.9, but we'll just round it up to 3. It'll be a negative 3. Like that's where it's going to end up. So it's actually going to be a 7-point drop, going from a +4 down to a -3. They're already saying this 6 weeks, 7 weeks into his presidency. And it's only going to get worse with these policies. But now you're starting to hear economists coming out saying, hey, man, get ready for a recession. Because inflation's going up. That's a key indicator of a recession coming. When inflation happens, employers are going to start laying off workers, right? And you got all these thousands of federal government people who are off right now. Hopefully the courts will say, hey, you can't do this and put them back to work. But right now there's plenty of them that aren't. So they're unemployed too. So unemployment's going up. Guess what else is going up? Credit card debt's going up. People don't have enough money to pay this increased prices. So our debt's going up. I also think producers are going to use this as an excuse to raise prices even more. They're going to come out and say, this is what they did after COVID, right? We got these tariffs and We had to raise our prices with COVID because of inflation was so high. And well, they're going to do the same thing here. Even though they don't have to, they're going to use it as an excuse to raise prices and keep them up there, which is going to raise inflation even more. Remember that our GDP is roughly 70% consumer spending drives it. Well, people are going to stop spending money here if this keeps up. The stock market is down the last 2 days. So Monday it dropped 650 points. Yesterday it dropped 670 points. I checked today, it's down, not as much yet, but the day is young. So yeah, things are really going great with the stock market, Trump. What's going to happen to your 401k accounts? Those of you who voted for Republicans. And let's not forget that what else is going to go up? The national debt is going to go up $4.5 trillion if they pass this budget that the House initially passed a resolution for. The only ones that are going to get a tax cut that he lied about last night are the people who make over $390,000. They're going to get a tax cut. The rest of us are going to get a tax increase. Medicaid is going to get cut by $880 million. I actually think it's going to be more than that. So more cuts to us, more cuts to the poor people that are covered under Medicaid. But hey, we got to own the libs, right? The latest consumer confidence number is down 6.7%. Biggest drop since August of 2021. Now, finally, the Supreme Court has basically come out and said, okay, you got to spend this $2 billion. Now, again, we'll have to see if he actually does it. But withholding that money, it has an effect on our economy, too. You add all this up, Americans are getting real nervous about the economy right now. And then you're going to get a snowball effect. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. This is why the Republicans are not showing up at their town halls anymore, or running away from them. I mean, literally, there's people running away from them. So people are pissed right now. And the Democrats need to take advantage of this. So as we go to break here, I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about the Democratic Party and at least how leadership is sort of failing us. Well, I shouldn't say sort of, it is. So I'll talk more about the Democrats now on the other side of the break. So we'll talk to you then. All right, welcome back to the third segment here on Politics Matters here on AM 950 Radio, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm your host, Bruce Klopfleisch, coming to you from my home today because of the snowstorm. So that's why this show looks a little bit different than it normally does, but that's okay. We're able to adapt. Speaking of adapting, I don't think the Democratic leadership is adapting very well to the situation. So as I said, going into the break, I'm going to talk about, in particular, Hakeem Jeffries in this segment. Because I really think the Democrats are dropping the ball here. I mean, there's a lot of openings here to go after Trump and go after, not just Trump, but to go after the Republicans. Because after all, you're running against, the Republicans in the midterms, assuming we have the midterm elections, which is a whole other issue. But so I'm going to get into this. And if I offend some Democrats out there, that's fine. I don't mind offending Democrats. I think Democrats need to be offended by what the leadership is doing, or more specifically, not doing. So I've said before on this show that Chuck Schumer had to go years ago, but he's still there. Hakeem Jeffries is, handpicked by Nancy Pelosi, which in and of itself should tell you something about him. They need to get out of the way, I think. Quit as the Democratic leaders in the House and the Senate. And why am I saying this? Well, they're certainly not meeting the moments that are out there. They are not inspiring leaders. I mean, if you listen to their speeches or you listen to them talk, they're just like, they don't have any passion. they do the monotone and all talking about, well, we don't, as I'll talk about later, we don't have any power to do anything. We don't have any leverage. Oh, and then they say things about Trump. Well, so what? But they don't have the fire. They don't have any passion that Democrats are wanting right now. This is the time to start fighting. But they're just not there. Well, why aren't they? Well, because they're bought and paid for by the corporate Democrats, basically. They are corporate Democrats. They're not progressives. I mean, don't be fooled by this. They're both from New York. I mean, they're representing Wall Street is what they're doing here. So part of what Jeffries, so again, I'm going to focus on him here, is he's pissing off his own base, like me. And I'm going to tell you why, by some of the things that he's been doing here. So one reason why is, and this is one of the parts where I just went, what? I mean, I had to listen to this again. But we're supposed to be the party representing the poor people, right? The low working man. Right? And the party has come out saying we got to do better here. Well, what did Hakeem Jeffries just do? He took $2.5 million from corporate donors of the Republicans. SpaceX, Elon Musk's company, donated money to the DCCC. This is the Democratic PAC to run for the Democratic candidates in the House. SpaceX gave money to Hakeem Jeffries. He went, and met with him, and he got some money from him. Palantir, this is another company that is owned by Peter Thiel. Now, if you haven't heard that name, look it up. He's another South African, like Musk, a Republican donor, a billionaire. He gave money to Jeffries for the DCCC. And so I actually had to go back and go, what? No, he didn't do this, did he? Yeah, he did. He's taking corporate money, which is not the way to run the next election. The way to run the next election is, and I'll give you some free advice here, Democrats. Not that I know everything here, but you got to turn this, as I said before, you got to turn this into a class war between the rich people and the rest of us. It's not a Democrat versus Republican issue. It's the rich people versus the rest of us. Really simple. And now you have Jeffries getting $2.5 million from the rich people, let alone the Republican rich people, the enemy. What the heck is he doing? The Republicans, if Jeffries does start, if the Democrats do start saying, well, it's the rich versus the poor, Republicans are going to throw this right back in our faces because Jeffries just took $2.5 million from the billionaires. Democrats should go out there and say, we're the party of getting the big money out of politics. Right? I read this all the time where Democrats are saying, money is the big problem here. You got to get rid of the money. This is what's killing us. So get rid of it. Go with the small dollar donations. You're going to ultimately get more money. And you're going to get the people more fired up to vote for you and go help you and turn out to vote instead of taking corporate cash. Jeffries. But, this is what Pelosi did. And this is why she pushed him to take over, because this is what he's going to do. He's taking money from the rich people. He's willing to be bought off. Right? And in doing so, he's betraying a base of voters. So, what are you doing, dude? Another thing that is a problem with the Democratic Party. If you go around asking people, okay, what do the Democrats stand for? You're going to get people are going to say nothing, because what are they doing out here? What message are they pushing? Or you're going to get thousands of them, or hundreds or thousands of them, all kinds of different things, right? Here's a simple one. Your life is tough now because of the billionaires, because of the oligarchs, because of the robber barons, because of the big corporations. That's the winning argument for getting Democrats, to come out, to go out to these town halls and to give money to your campaign and to actually turn out and vote. Remember, Harris lost a lot of votes in the last election. because there was enough pissed off Democrats. Right? And if you do this, rich versus poor thing, you might even get some Republicans to vote for you, but you can't take money from them, dude. And then all the studies done on this, particular issue about money and politics, they all come out the same, saying the rich people get what they want, the rest of us don't, for the most part, from Congress. Why is that? Well, because they get the money. They give them the money. So they get what they want most of the time. You got to get big money out of politics, and by taking this money, you're just going to get that thrown right back in your face. It makes you look like, a hypocrite, which you are, Hakeem Jeffries, and all the other corporate Democrats who do the same damn thing. Now, you look at some of the Democratic politicians like Bernie Sanders. Now, I know he's an independent, so okay, but he's a Democrat. Honest policy. He doesn't take corporate money. He wins elections overwhelmingly. He gets plenty of money. Okay? So, you can also come out and say, hey, we're going to tax the rich people more. So we can pay for universal health care for you, child care for you, increase the Social Security program, as I mentioned before, raising the minimum wage, free college. Right? We can do all these things for the everyday working person. Get more paid family leave, that kind of stuff, right? Tax the rich people, you can pay for that stuff. You don't hear that from Hakeem Jeffries. What you do hear from him is he comes out recently and says, I'm getting attacked by the far left and the far right, just as much by the far left. We don't have leverage to do anything because we don't have the votes in Congress. Well, boo-hoo. If you're not fighting for stuff, why are people going to vote for you? He's basically coming out saying, Democrats, you can't criticize me. I'm the likely Speaker of the House if we win in 2026. Well, that's assuming, of course, we have 2026 elections. But, I don't think it's a done deal that the Democrats are going to win in 2026, given what's going on now with the elections. You're not even fighting for your own party right now. Like, you're taking money from Republicans. And what does far left mean? You're equating that with, a bunch of negative stuff. That's, for all we know, that you're talking about progressives here. And you wonder why some Democrats didn't vote for you in 2024? Remember, if you want some control over your life, you need to be interested in and participate in politics. This is why politics matters to everyone. Talk to you next week.
Friendly voice, a companion.